Welcome to Chris Clegg's Minor League Baseball Show. Insight on the future starts of Major League Baseball today. From in-depth scouting reports, player interviews, and can't-miss performances. If it's happening in the minors, we have you covered. Here's your host, Chris Clegg.
Welcome into Minor League Baseball Show, the first one of the offseason. We took a little break and we're back as now I'm diving into team-by-team top prospect rankings, and we'll be doing podcasts to kind of cover all those as well. I'll be bringing guests on. And this is the first one, the Boston Red Sox farm system. It's one that I cover the majority of the time here in Greenville, and I've got a great guest joining me as well, Ian Cundall. He's the director of scouting at SoxProspects. He covers the entire farm system from spring training all the way to this time of year, all levels. And I figure that's the best guest to bring on. I hang out with Ian at least once a year, if not multiple times a year in Florida. And then he comes down to Greenville as well. So glad that he's on the show. He'll bring great insight from all the players that we're discussing today. But Ian, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, Chris, and that was a great intro. Really appreciate the kind words, and yeah, it's always fun when we get to hang out. Which it is usually about twice a year because we always seem to match up in Florida when we're down there. We'll catch some games, and then obviously Greenville too. So it's always good watching baseball and talking shop with you.
That's right, man. It's always a good time, and we've got a lot to discuss today. The farm system isn't where it was this time a year ago, largely due to just graduations, but I still think the farm system's in really good shape for the Red Sox. They've done a lot of good things. I thought they drafted extremely well. We'll talk several of those guys today, but how would you define the state of the farm system right now, just given the fact that we did graduate Roman Anthony and Kristian Campbell and Marcelo Meyer on most lists? I know the service time thing, and the at-bats is throwing some companies for loops, but where's the farm system at right now?
So I think there's two real things at play here. The first one is it's obviously going to see a downturn when you're looking at like team rankings and overall quality, because you take out three guys who are top 30-ish prospects nationally to start the season. When you take that out, that's a pretty big loss for an organization. But obviously it's for good reason. Anthony graduated, Meyer and Campbell will still TBD, but it's for good reason. And so as a result, I think the quality, especially at the top, is a little down. But I think overall, there's still pretty good depth. And the other shift, though, is that this depth is what was once a hitting-dominated system is now just a pitching-dominated system. If you look at the rankings or our rankings specifically, it's mostly pitchers in the top 30. And it's because the Red Sox have devoted a lot of resources in the draft the last couple of years to retooling their pitching development, or their pitching depth in the system. And in addition, in trades, they've gone out and acquired a lot of pitchers too. So it's, something Craig Breslow has emphasized here is they wanted to rebuild the pitching pipeline. And I think what we've seen this year and the strides a lot of the guys they've made is the beginning of that. And they've really, they've turned around a system that was very hitting heavy for many years to now it's extremely pitching heavy, especially at the top.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I noticed too when I was writing up the top 30, and I just went and counted 18 of my top 30 are pitchers. Obviously a fantasy slant, but not a whole lot changes from that lens as far as pitchers go, from real life to fantasy in most cases. But yeah, the system is full of a lot of pitching talent, and they develop pitchers really good as well. We've seen the jump from Peyton Tolley last year to where he is now, to go from he was in Greenville in high A all the way to the majors and to log quality innings down the stretch in the playoffs. Like, that was huge. And I just look at what they did in the last draft as well. And we'll talk about several of those arms, but yeah, they're just going to continue to develop. And I'm really excited to see what they do with a lot of these arms. And it puts you in a good spot too, because you can never have too much pitching. Gives you a lot of depth to trade out of as well. Teams are always looking for pitching, and they put themselves in a good spot moving forward, I think.
Couldn't agree more. And I think that the thing that they do really well with pitching is they're able to elevate guys. And this is something they've really struggled under past baseball operations, like people, was they just wouldn't take pitchers high in draft or target the type of guys that play in this day and age. And you look at what is playing in the playoffs, especially, it's guys who throw hard, it's big body guys. It's, you got to have good fastballs that can miss bats in the zone. And if you don't have that, at least you got to be able to throw hard and have secondaries that can miss bats. And for years, the Red Sox, they were missing the mark with the pitchers they were targeting. And now under Craig Breslow, Justin Willard, and the guys who are in charge now of the pitching development, they're targeting those guys. You saw Peyton Tolley. He was a guy. Did he throw very hard? No, but he was 6'6", great athlete, 250 pounds, and his velo jumped from 91 to like 96.5 in a year. You look at Connolly Early, another guy, very athletic, really loose, great secondaries, like really good secondaries already. Fastball velocity was light. Still on the lighter side, it's taken a step forward now. He's sitting in, 93, 94 instead of being down at 90, 91, where he was when he entered the org. But he still got those secondaries, and we saw what he could do down the stretch. And, you just keep moving down the list, and Brandon Clark, Juan Valera. I mean, we didn't even see him this year, but I'm sure we'll talk about him. Kyson Witherspoon, Yhoiker Fajardo. Like, they just have a lot of guys who throw hard, can miss bats, and have developing secondaries. And I think that's a really good spot to be in when you're trying to, given the state of how important pitching and quality pitching is, especially when it comes to October.
Absolutely. So obviously, like, the farm system's in a good spot. They're in a spot they can make another big splash if they wanted to. What do you think the Red Sox are looking to do this offseason to take that next leap forward? They're close. I mean, we saw that this year, but what's the next step look like for them? And what do you think they go out and do this offseason?
I think that pitching wise, have the depth. They just need another high-end talent. You look at their rotation, and between all the young guys I just mentioned, Cutter Crawford's coming back from an injury. You've got Richard Fitz coming back from injury. Hunter Dobbins coming back from injury. Patrick Sandoval coming back from injury. You have a lot of guys I think you'd be comfortable throwing in that 4 or 5 slot. And then you have Garrett Crochet, who's obviously, top 5 pitcher in baseball probably. And then Brian Bayo, who I think is a solid mid-rotation starter. What you're really missing is that number 2 starter that can pitch between Crochet and Bayo. And I think that on the pitching side is going to be the number 1 target. And the way they can go out and get there, there's obviously the free agency, but I also think a trade is probably more likely here, because what the Red Sox do have, they might not have the position player prospect depth. They do have position player depth at the major leagues, and they eventually are going to have to trade an outfielder. They just don't have room to play all of Rafaela, Abreu, Anthony, and Duran. So I think one of those guys is probably would likely to be dealt in order to fill that pitching gap. And then on the position player side, I think there's a lot of flux with their infield right now. Other than catcher, you could make a case that they could have 4 open infield spots, because first base, who knows? Tristan Costas coming back from a serious knee injury. It's hard to pencil a guy into an everyday role who is coming off that type of injury. Second base, you have Marcelo Meyer, but he might have to play shortstop if Trevor Story opts out. Third base, you've got Alex Bregman, who's going to opt out. And obviously, I think the overwhelming sentiment in Boston is that he's going to eventually get re-signed. But you never know with Scott Boras' client. If he gets a good offer elsewhere, I wouldn't be surprised if he left. So I think there's a lot in flux with the infield. And so there's going to be a lot of movement there, trying to figure out, put together a competitive infield there for next season.
Yeah, I think it'll be really interesting to see how it shakes out, but they're in a good spot moving forward. And, the money should be there. The assets are there if they want to make a trade. So
exactly.
I think Red Sox fans have plenty to be excited about despite the early exit this postseason, because the team should be in much better shape next year. And we've seen Breslow go out and be willing to do what he needs to do. It's just now taking those next steps with the team. I mean, it's kind of crazy now to look back at the Garrett Crochet extension of what he got. And now you look at what Tarek Skubbal's seeking, like, it looks like a steal. And so, in this pitching market and how good Crochet, we knew Crochet was great, but he took even more steps forward. As you said, one of the best pitchers in the game. And now you've got him on a pretty solid deal for the next 6 years there. That looks really good right now.
Yeah, that was why at the time too, is something that I think we talked about, was you have to extend him. You cannot give up that many assets and risk him walking away in a year. And the longer you wait, the more it's going to cost, because if they waited till the end of the season and had the extension, probably cost them another $100 million. And if the risk was, okay, maybe he gets hurt. If he gets hurt, he's just going to go to free agency anyway. So there was no reason for them not to try and get a deal done, which they did ultimately, which is important. And yeah, I mean, Crochet would have been a 27-year-old ace hitting the market. You see what they're talking about for Skubal, and Skubal's 31, I think, or 30 when he's going to be hitting the market. So yeah, the number that Crochet would have got in free agency is astronomical. And Red Sox, I mean, Craig Breslow deserves a lot of credit for being able to get that deal done and get across the line, given how at times it looked like it might not get there.
Yeah. So let's talk one more topic. He's technically a graduated prospect, but I think it's something that people want to know, especially like dynasty managers, is Kristian Campbell, who he got the extension preseason. He looked pretty good out of the gate, and then it kind of fell apart. We know he dealt with an injury, and he spends the rest of the year in AAA Worcester. You got to see him a lot there. I was just talking to somebody who worked with the Woo Sox in Arizona about Campbell a little bit. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on what you saw down the stretch, and what's the outlook look like for Kristian Campbell right now?
It's a tricky one. It's one of the more unique cases I've seen because, as you said, he was the rookie of the month for April, and then he comes out in May and is arguably one of the worst 3 hitters in all of baseball, and then he gets sent down. And I do think it's not, they've not said it publicly, and they're not using it as an excuse, but there was just a steep downturn after he missed a few days with a rib injury at the beginning of May. And I don't know if that, affected him the whole season. At the very least, it seemed like it made him change his swing mechanics, because if you looked at some of the Baseball Savant stance data, it was very different in May. And it's kind of like a chicken or egg thing. Was it because he was compensating for an injury, or was it because he was not hitting well and he was trying to find something that worked? That we don't know the answer to that. But there was definitely a change in his stance, and the way he was attacking the baseball it just wasn't the same. And you look, he went down to AAA, he got off to a really rough start, kind of figured it out there, went on a long hitting streak, and his surface numbers were pretty good. But looking at the underlying data, it's just there was still a steep downturn from where it was last season or even in the month of April. His hard hit rate and exit velocities were way down compared to what they were when he was at his peak. And some of the approach metrics were similar, but there was just a lot more whiff too. And if you watched him in person, his swing just didn't have that same oomph, he didn't have the same impactability he was showing last season and even in April. And I don't know if, it's hard to say right now, honestly. And it's funny. I had Alex Spear on our podcast yesterday talking about this very thing. And I don't think anyone knows. It's one of these, they've given him time off. He's not doing any baseball stuff right now, which I think is 100% the right move. This is a guy who needed a reset. Just get your mind off baseball, go home, spend time with your family. And then they'll bring him back in at some point this winter and start trying to rebuild. And I think that's what it is. It's the talent is still in there. It's just how do they get back to that level? And I think if anyone is telling you that they know if he's able to, that they're not telling the truth, because I don't think anyone knows right now. Could he return to his form in April? He was in April, or even in 2024 when he was the minor league player of the year. Absolutely. Could what he ended up showing at the end of last season be kind of the new norm too? Definitely. There's very wide error bars here, but I think ultimately, I just really find it hard to believe he just lost it. I just don't think that happens. I think that he'll figure it out and kind of get back to at least being a quality major leaguer in some role. But I think that, there's just a lot wide error bars here with Campbell now. Whereas I feel like, entering last season, I think people were pretty confident in the range of outcomes for him.
Yeah, I find it hard that the 2024 season was a complete fluke, considering
exactly
it sustained all year and
across 3 different levels.
Yeah, he wasn't just in high A, just beating up on them all.
No,
he went to double, and he went to triple, and he was good. The data was good on him. There wasn't anything that was red flaggish at all with the performance. So, I think that you look at a guy like this, and what I knew about him from his time in Greenville is that he was a locker room leader. He's a reserved guy in some sense, but also he's a leader. He's going to put in the work needed. And I feel like that he's going to get back. Like you said, it's still a question. There's no, the confidence of what he will be is, I don't know, but Major League Ball is just a different game and it's hard. But, I expect him to, just like you said, he needs the time off just to reset mentally, maybe reset the swings. We were comparing the swing, I think in September, and it honestly looked a lot like when he entered pro ball right after the draft in 2023. And we knew his issues then were not contact related. They weren't power related, because he hit the ball hard at Georgia Tech and he
couldn't elevate it.
Contact. Yeah, it was a lot of ground balls and he couldn't elevate. And that's kind of where he's back to now.
Yep.
So it's kind of getting back the swing to where it needs to be, like 2024. And hopefully he can get back on track. And I hope that he'll get a shot to compete for that second base spot and be in a good spot mentally and mechanically, really, to compete in 2026.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing, is because I saw him probably 20 plus games after his AAA stint. And I think there was a lot of this is a guy who was a very, you could see he was very positive, very confident, really, there was a lot of personality when he was playing the game. And by the end of the season, it looked like almost he was going through the motions, and not in the way that he's lazy or anything, just in the, I have no answers. I don't know what I got nothing, because it seemed like they had tried everything and still it just wasn't clicking. And I think that's why, the Red Sox saw the same thing. It's why he didn't come back to the majors. And there, I don't think it was even in their consideration, regardless of how good his numbers were in AAA, because if you watched him in person, he just wasn't the same hitter at the plate. And yeah, I think that, having a reset this offseason is what he needs. And then there are opportunities on this roster, as you said. I don't know if we don't know what they're going to do with him defensively. I don't think they know yet either. But I think ultimately it's going to come down to second base or left field for him. But in either role, there's potentially an opportunity because as crowded as the Red Sox outfield is, it's very left-handed on the corners. And so they really could use another right-handed hitting outfield option or a second base option or potentially both. I think there's a fit either way on the roster. So it's just a question of, is the bat going to get back to a level where he can, be comfortable hitting major league pitching again?
Absolutely. So let's dive in on the farm system. A lot of guys to talk about. First, figure we'll talk about Luis Perales, who returned. He was somebody who I got to see a lot in Greenville when he came up in 2023, and then in 2024, like it was full breakout mode. Like He looked like one of the better pitching prospects in the game. Unfortunately, he blows out. I think you were at that start, if I'm not mistaken.
I was, unfortunately.
Yeah. And then he misses the rest of the 2024 season, nearly misses all of 2025.
Yep.
But he does come back and logs a couple innings in AAA, and then he's out in the AFL right now, where I just was. So it's really interesting. I'm curious your thoughts of what you saw, because it looks pretty good so far with what we've seen. Despite what the surface numbers may say, there's a lot to be encouraged with Luis Perales right now.
Definitely. And I was able to see him at the end of the season in Worcester. Short stints, just single 1 inning or maybe 2 innings. But I think the most encouraging thing for me, and I think it's hard to read because the command and the control right now is still a work in progress. Right. That's understandable. The guy just missed, 14, 15 months. So that's going to take a little time to develop. I think the encouraging thing for me is he's showing the same quality of stuff that he was pre-injury. This is a guy who can run his fastball up to 101 miles an hour. He's got 3 secondary pitches that he's comfortable throwing in any count. I saw one of his outings. I don't think he threw a single fastball in the entire outing. He struck out, I want to say 3 guys, just throwing cutters, splitters, and breaking balls. And that's the thing that when he's at his best, he's a 4-pitch guy who can mix them and throw them at any count. Like I remember the start where he ultimately got hurt. He would just one at bat, it was a cutter to start it off. The next time, here, you want a first pitch splitter? Go ahead. Hitters just it's a really uncomfortable at bat because there is some violence in his delivery, but the stuff is so good and you just have no idea what's going to come because he's willing to throw any pitch in any count. And so I think that's when he's at his best. It's when he's mixing 4 pitches with, elite velocity. And that made him one of the most exciting pitching prospects. And I still think there's a chance for that. It's just, there are there's an error bar here, and that's because of the combination of the injury. And he's not a very physical guy. He's probably 6'1", 175, 180 pounds. This isn't a guy who I would say has your prototypical starter's build. But then again, we've seen guys make that build work at the major league level. He's a good athlete. It's a really quick arm. And if he can just, get the command and control back to where it was pre-injury, then I think that he'll be in a pretty good spot especially since he's already on the 40. I wouldn't be surprised if we see him in the majors next season, assuming he stays healthy.
Yeah, kind of seems like the case where he's on that fast track, and obviously he's got to build back up, but super talented arm, and the stuff will play, and it's good to see the stuff back. I think that you can give him a pass with a command.
Exactly.
Got it. And if you look at his AFL surface stats, just throw him out the window because the ball moves so differently there because the thin air and locations end up being different than pitchers are used to. Mm-hmm. And so you're going to leave some pitches over the heart that you typically wouldn't. And so I think that just naturally, you look at that environment with command that's still going to be inconsistent coming back from TJ, just flushes surface numbers. I wouldn't think twice about him. Just be encouraged that the stuff looks there. He's clipping 100 regularly. I think he hit 100.5 in one of the outings I saw him. And so it's there. It's good to see it all back. So a lot to be excited about with Perales.
Definitely.
So the next guy is Franklin Arias, who's interesting. Mm-hmm. We've long known about Franklin Arias, and this year he really took off in the public sphere. And it was kind of warranted based on this surface number start. He was phenomenal through the first 2 months. Through June 8th, he slashed 351, 397, 474. And he was in the top 10 overall of some major prospect outlets. And then after that, it kind of went downhill. He slashed 227, 291, 326 over his final 268 plate appearances. I've always been a little more critical of Arias than most have. I'm curious to know your thoughts as well. You've seen him throughout his time in Greenville, and I think some in Portland maybe to end the year. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on Franklin Arias. Who is he?
It's a great question. And I think to me, he's a high floor, lower ceiling player who is going to get carried by his defense and his ability to make contact, because I think those are his two biggest strengths. He's a very good defender. The way he gets there is a little different than most shortstops because he's a good athlete while being a 40 runner, which you don't really see very often. And his lack of foot speed is pretty much only evident on the base pass. Like, it doesn't show in the field, which is one of the weirder things. When he's moving laterally, he has no issues. You know, when you've seen him, he has good range. Like, he's comfortable charging the ball. But then he gets in the box and he's I don't think I got a time, and I talked to a bunch of scouts. I don't think anyone's got a time quicker than like 4.3 on him to first base, which is just very weird because this is a guy who was their minor league base runner of the year in 2024 and stole, I want to say, like 40 bases in between the complex and Salem. And this year, I don't think he had double-digit steals, and at the very least, he had as many caught steals as stolen bases. I don't know if you have those numbers up. And so with the foot speed thing, it's interesting because at the plate, there's not a lot of power here. This is a contact-oriented guy who runs an elite zone contact rate. It's around, I think, 94% for the season. He makes a ton of contact on everything, and it's because he's a free swinger. You know, he does not see a lot of pitches. He's going up there to hit. He's not going up there to walk. And, you know, that works, I think, to an extent. We saw the limitations as the season went on because guys would just get him out. And if you look at the underlying data, his chase rate jumped considerably from where it was the year before. But at the same time, his own contact rate jumped a ton also. And so it's just a very weird profile where you don't see this often where, you know, a guy will all of a sudden, because his zone contact rate went up 12% to get up into the low 90s, but his chase rate went up 5% at the same time. And he saw almost 0.6 pitches per plate appearance fewer. So he's getting more aggressive on swinging at everything, but he's also making way more contact. The trade-off then becomes his hard hit numbers did not improve. They actually got worse this season than they were last year. And you don't usually see that. You know, you would expect a guy like him who's a teenager, as they move up the level, they get stronger in the offseason, they're going to hit the ball harder, more consistently. He went the opposite way. So I think there's a lot of volatility with his profile at the plate. I think that he's going to make contact. I don't think anyone disputes that. I think the swing is good. You know, when he hits it, it's line drives in the gap. But I think the power is limited, and I think the speed is limited. And I think for fantasy, that's not kind of the profile I personally would be targeting. I think there's just a lot of limitations with him for fantasy. I think for real life, he's a much better player because the defense comes into play, and we've seen in the playoffs, especially the value of guys who can make contact consistently. So I think that for him, that it's going to be interesting to see what happens next season. You know, does he start trading off maybe some of that contact in order to make more impact, or does he just try to become, you know, one of those empty batting average guys who gets to the big leagues because they can hit 280, doesn't walk very much, doesn't strike out really either, but plays good enough defense that they can hold down an everyday role. So I think that he's an exciting player. I just don't think he has the type of upside you would assume for someone who's, you know, the 19-year-old up the middle Latin prospect.
Yeah, and I fully agree. And, you know, I think people were really hyped and thought he was fast, given, you know, 2024, he stole 35 bases, caught 6 times, but it was mostly all at the complex. Like, you know, 30 of those 35 were at the complex. And then this year, he stole 12 bases, caught 9 times, but he had a 50% success rate after he moved up from single A. Yeah. And it just shows you that, like, catching's really bad at the lower levels. And that's something that you have to look at. And guys that certainly do have below average foot speed can get away with it. So I kind of echo all those sentiments. A lot of his batted balls, grounders in the gap. And a lot of times they're like those kind of dinky liners that he may, you know, pop over opposite field over the second baseman's head, or if he pulls it, he's getting it in the left field gap. But, you know, I don't think any of his home runs in Greenville were hit like over 103, if I'm not mistaken. They were all like around 100, you know, for a while until like he popped to 103 towards the end of like his time there and was promoted. But it's just not a big power bat. I get it. He's young. I don't see a lot of room on the frame to really fill out more. He kind of already did that last offseason. He added a little bit, in my opinion, from what I saw in the spring of 2024 to then this spring, but we didn't see the power jump, as you mentioned. So,
well, my worry with, I don't think it's a frame that can support a ton of added power. Yeah. And I always get concerned when I see guys lose that much foot speed. And the sprint speed data is down considerably too. This is not just a stopwatch thing. This is something I was able to check that. And, you know, when you see a guy take that much of a drastic drop in sprint speed, it does make me wonder what happens if all of a sudden he comes in, you know, 10, 15 pounds stronger next year. Does it go down another level? Because there's a trade-off. If guys are going to get stronger and bigger like that, bulkier, they're going to have to give something up elsewhere. And I do wonder what happens if he does try to make that trade off. Because it's not necessarily might not be the best for him given where he's kind of at profile wise right now.
Yeah. So then if he suddenly adds 15 pounds, like does the athleticism fall to where he does potentially have to move off short? Then there's
which is a problem.
Yeah.
Because if he's
hinging there.
Yeah, a lot of the value with him is tied up in his defense. And at shortstop, we've seen it. If you're a potential above average plus shortstop, which I think he is, you can get by being with an empty batting average. If all of a sudden he's, getting pushed to second base or third base, then it becomes, well, there's more pressure on you to hit. And I don't know if you have that you're going to have the impact ability to kind of go with your contact.
Yeah. So I don't know. It'd be interesting to see his development. He'll turn 20 next month. So it'll be an interesting year for him in 2026, but one to kind of follow closely. So the Red Sox drafted 3 pitchers in the first 4 picks last year. A lot of talent. Kyson Witherspoon in the first kind of fell in their lap, I would say. That was a top 10 talent,
yes.
in my opinion. And they got 2 other SEC arms as well, and Anthony Iyanson and Marcus Phillips. I'm curious where do you think those guys start their pro career? I have hopes they'll all be in Greenville to start next year, but any thoughts there? Any thoughts you have on those 3 arms?
I mean, I think with Witherspoon, number one, I'm going to guess the Red Sox were not expecting him to be there because I don't think really anyone was. But when he was, that's the type of talent you can't pass up. You're talking about a guy with SEC pedigree who comes in throwing 5 pitches and they're all, average-ish, maybe or fringy at least. And then he's got potential for maybe 3 above average to plus pitches. That's a really exciting player. And he's someone that, watching these playoffs has really made me wonder if they're just going to start him in Portland, because you look and there's draftees, there's multiple pitching draftees from last year's class who are making big impacts, no more so than Trey Savage, who we saw go out in the American League Championship Series and just shut down the Seattle lineup for, 4 innings, or he gave up a couple runs, but he was just missing bats at an insane level. And I kind of wonder if Witherspoon is someone they just try to fast track. Like he doesn't seem like there's a lot of development remaining. He kind of, he is what he is. There's, as I said, 3 really good pitches, 2 that are, workable, usable in sequence. And I think that he's someone who we could start in Portland. They could start in Portland and then we could see him, potentially pushing for a call up by the end of the season if he's good. I think he's that type of player. When you take a pitcher in the top 10 in the draft, I always wonder, is it worth wasting their bullets in the low minors, especially? And with someone like Witherspoon, who's as polished as he is, I'm not sure there is. The other 2, I think, have a much better chance, and I think both of them probably start in Greenville. Phillips to me is actually both of them are really interesting, but I think for different reasons. Phillips I kind of feel like fits that Tolley mode where it's just a huge ball of clay, and it's how are they going to mold him with their pitch modeling and the way they do everything, with the high speed cameras, just trying to maximize every little inefficiency they can, whether it be, his grips, how he's spinning the ball, all that stuff. And I think with him, when you've got someone who's as good an athlete as he is, who's 6'4", 250, with, velo, where he's already got the velo. And now it's about, hey, can we, refine your secondaries and find, consistent bat missing ability with those. I think he's really interesting. It was one of the worst kept secrets in baseball that the Red Sox wanted him with the 33rd pick. And, when it obviously came to fruition, and I think they're very excited about him, and he's someone I'm really interested to see. Iyanson, I think, fits more in that camp we talked about earlier of guys who just need to add velo. This is, another guy with great SEC pedigree who's extremely polished, throws a lot of strikes and missed a lot of bats at the in the college level. But a lot of that, I think, was more due to do with sequencing and his ability to spin his secondaries and locate. This isn't a guy with overpowering velocity. He was 92 to 94, topped out at 97.7 in college. But I think he's someone that they think can add velocity. And if he can take a step forward in that regard, he becomes very interesting because of the polish with his secondaries. I think the fastball was always the question mark. If all of a sudden, and given their track record with it wouldn't surprise me if he comes out next spring throwing, 95, 96. And if he does that, I think he's someone who could be a really good value in fantasy leagues, because he's going to get drafted because he was a 3rd round pick. He fell a little bit below where he was expected to be drafted, but you might get a discount there that it is not going to be there come the spring if he comes out with more velocity, which I think is something that, given the Red Sox track record, would not surprise me at all.
Absolutely. I think all 3 stand cases to be really good and move up rankings in the system this year. Yeah. All very talented. Like I said, all 3 kind of different arms, but excited to see all those guys. Somebody that is pretty exciting is Justin Gonzales, who he took major steps forward this year. I mean, this is a massive outfielder, maybe moves off outfield, but
he might be a first baseman.
Yeah, like he's up to like 6'6" now, really long levers, and he took a pretty good leap like as the season went on in Salem, and then winds up in Greenville to end the year. Gonzales has massive power, actually made respectable contact. It got better as the year went on, and there's just kind of a flaw that he hits too many ground balls, but it's still a young prospect who has a lot to like. But what are your thoughts on Gonzales, and what does the future look like for him?
He's a fascinating player because I think that there's a very, like, his under the surface numbers, there's some insane stuff there. You're talking about an 18-year-old who has a 90th percentile exit velocity just under 107 miles an hour and runs a 45%, well, almost 46% hard hit rate. That's like major league quality batted ball data right there, and he's 18 years old, and it makes sense because physically he looks like he probably should be in the majors, as he's 6'6". You said probably 230, 240 maybe, but he's a pretty good athlete for that size. Like, he carries the weight well. It's not like he's it's not a soft body or anything, but he does have this one very big limitation, and he had a 58.2% ground ball rate last year and a 15.5% fly ball rate. And when you're 6'6" with that type of power, you got to hit the ball in the air. And I think that's the biggest thing. This offseason is going to be devoted to retooling his swing so that he can hit the ball in the air. And if he can do that, watch out, because this is a guy who it's 25 plus home run raw power easily. And I think that he's going to be a little lower because there's a lot of risks with maxed out right guys who don't hit the ball in the air. You're making a lot of assumptions to get him to where he could be with his ceiling. But also, if you're looking at like more model driven, talking about more model driven organizations, or looking at some of those like kind of driven lists, he's going to be way up there. Because I've talked to some analysts who think he's like a top 5 prospect in the system already, but then you talk to scouts who are more skeptical. So I think there's a pretty big divide in what he could be and what he is right now. And a lot of it's going to come down to what happens with the swing changes that they try to make with him this offseason.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to follow for sure. I mean, the upside's apparent. It's just getting into games, but still, to have the traits that he does at that age is kind of crazy, and almost similar to this guy in a sense. And Enddy Azocar was a lot of buzz for a little while coming out of the complex. He had put up some pretty flashy, like, under the hood numbers before he went to Salem. And I know that the numbers in Salem weren't great, but I thought there were still some positives to take away from Azocar's time in Salem, despite looking at a pretty poor slash line. And I think that's just still a prospect that there's a lot to like as well. Another 18-year-old who won't turn 18 until, spring training's already begun next year. So he's like a 6'2", like kind of a lankier athlete with some room to fill out. But what is there to like with Azocar, and is he a potential breakout in the system next season?
I think he is. I think that obviously, as you said, he struggled in Salem. He hit 202, 273 on base, 314 slug. But this is a guy, when you talk to scouts who saw him in the FCL at the beginning of the season, they said he was one of the most talented players there. And the under the surface data, as bad as the triple slash was, is still very encouraging. This is a guy who hits the ball extremely hard, 105 plus 90th percentile EV, 42% hard hit rate. Good contact rates, as you said, little aggressive, but the chase rate, it's not terrible. It's sub 30%. And he can, he actually had an idea of what he was doing at the plate. This is a guy who has some feel against secondaries. He can hit fastballs already, which is good. And I think there's projection in the frame. And I think that's the difference between him and Gonzales. Gonzales is pretty filled out, maxed out physically. Azocar is that more prototypical, tall, lean, lanky projection teenage prospect. And as you said, 6'2", 170. I remember seeing him in spring training, hit a couple home runs, and kind of liking the swing, because this is an under the radar guy. This guy signed for $10K 2 years ago in 2014, $40K in 2014. So he didn't have that pedigree, but the fact that they pushed him stateside, I think, showed that they had some confidence in him. And I think regardless of the struggles, he held his own as an 18-year-old in full season ball in his first year stateside. I think that's still pretty impressive. And when you combine that with those under the surface numbers and some intriguing, scouting, if you see him in person, there are some. He's got a good swing, like it's a very aesthetically pleasing swing. I think there's some good mechanical things going on there. I think there's upside here. It's just question of is he going to be able to put it together? There's obviously variance and risk with when you're talking about the teenage position player prospects, but I think there's a lot to like here, and I think that that he's a very good pick for someone who could break out next year.
Yep, totally in agreement there. A lot of talent. He was put up some pretty gaudy exit velocities under the hood. So certainly some stuff to like there. This next guy, pitcher, Yhoiker Fajardo, he ended the year really strong, really impressed me. He was with Single A Salem as an 18-year-old, and he was just dominant down the stretch. From the beginning of August forward, he struck out 39% of batters. He did have 11% walk rate, but it was honestly inflated by the last start over that span. But he really ticked up. He's got like a 6'3", kind of projectable frame. Fastball was already like 93, 95, like touching 97 at times. Thought the slider looked good when he really snapped it off. But what's there to like about Yhoiker Fajardo?
Yeah, it's a tricky name. They don't make it easy here. But Fajardo, I think the biggest thing with him actually might be the secondaries. He had two secondaries that ran miss whiff rates above 40% in his changeup. It's a kick change and his slider. Fastball has good velo. It's pretty dead zone shape wise, and I think that's kind of the limitation here. They're going to have to do some tweaking with the fastball to kind of find one that's a more effective pitch, because I think its whiff rate. Yeah, it was a 13% whiff rate last year on the fastball. So even with that velocity, it's not missing bats, but he has two secondaries that he can go to comfortably that can miss bats. And when you're, a teenage pitching prospect with advanced feel for two secondaries and the ability to locate them in the zone, that's something that is really catches your eye and is something that you can really kind of, I think you can bank on. There's at least a floor there with that. It's a starter's build. It's starter's velo. It's can you find the fastball shape to enable you to be able to your secondaries to play against more advanced hitters. And I think that's the question here. But I think that in terms of developmentally, you couldn't have asked for a better year from him. This is a guy who he was in the complex. He was acquired in a small deal for Cam Boozer, who was designated for assignment. And he's turned into someone who I don't know where you have him, but we have him inside our top 15 prospects in the system already. It's a heck of a find by the Red Sox scouting and analyst team. So I think there's a lot to like here. It's just a question of, and this is, but the questions with the fastball shape, this is something the Red Sox have done really well, is they've been able to, they're really good at, identifying pitches and tweaking them in order to find them ways to make them viable. And so I think that it's going to be really interesting to see what they do with Fajardo's fastball over the offseason and how it looks next spring, and then kind of compare it to what the shape was this year. Because I think if he takes a step forward in this regard, that this is a guy who could jump into the top 10 prospects in the system.
Agreed. Yeah, I've got him at 10 right now, a little aggressive, but I do think that the ingredients are there for him to be really good. There's kind of a clump of pitchers there for me in that kind of 10 to 15 range that
we have 11.
Yeah, so like he's still kind of a ball of clay in the sense where he just turned 19. So young, projectable, they can do some work, and I trust their pitch dev to really, make the tweaks that he needs to be successful. So I'm excited to see what a full season in 2026 looks like for him. Let's round out the show with a couple sleepers. Maybe these guys aren't so much sleepers, but they could really take off next year. We both picked one. Ian, you want to give the guys your sleeper for 2026?
Yeah, so I think my pick for breakout would be Henry Godbout, who was the second round pick, comp pick by the Red Sox last year. He was the one position player they took when you mentioned that they took three pitchers in the first four picks. He's 6'2", 190-pound middle infielder out of UVA, signed for just over $1 million. And he had a really good pro debut with Greenville, 341, 473, 477 in 13 games. He did miss some time with an injury. But I think there's a lot to like here with him profile-wise, because he fits this mold of the Red Sox position player prospect that they've been able to elevate lately. He's got a really good approach. He's got really, he can hit every type of pitch. It's got really good launch angle stuff in regards to he hits the ball in the air, can hit the ball in the air to the pull side. He just needs to get stronger and increase his bat speed. If you look at the underlying data from his time, it's not 100, didn't hit this. It was small sample. It's only 55 plate appearances, but 14% chase rate, 11% in zone miss rate, and only a 31% or 32% ground ball rate. There's a lot to like there. It's just, the EV numbers were not great. It's like a 90th was just over 100 miles an hour. Hard hit rate was only just under 30%. So if he can get in their bat speed program, and this is something the Red Sox have done really well. We saw it. I think Kristian Campbell is the best example, but they've been able to elevate a lot of guys' bat speeds and get them to hit the ball harder. And if he can do that, I think when you combine that with the approach metrics he already has and kind of just his overall profile at the plate, he could be a really interesting player for 2026 and beyond.
Yeah, I agree. I think that he's just a prime candidate for that bat speed program, and really curious to see what he looks like next spring. Because I think that for what I saw in his few games in Greenville, looks the part for sure. You got a good frame. There's still a little bit of room to add some strength, and he's had really good approach and contact skills to carry.
Yep.
So my pick is John Holobetz, who
great choice,
was kind of the throw-in in that Quinn Priester trade. At the time, it seemed like you get Yhoiker Rodriguez, who was very hyped. They get the draft pick back in the comp round. And then it was John Holobetz seemed like the just distant third piece there. And, he was a 2024 fifth rounder. He really surprised me when he came to Greenville. I mean, for the season, he was great. 124 and 2/3, 3.03 ERA, 24% K rate, 4% walk rate. His command was really, really good. He built up innings all year. Final 6 starts were all 6 or more innings, which was impressive. And honestly, like the velo got a little better throughout the year too. From the first time that I saw him in Greenville, he running up to 97. He's like 93, 95 pretty consistently, but he had some good traits, good extension on the fastball, 3 secondary pitches with a slider in like the mid to upper 80s, got some solid depth, some 2-plane movement at times on that. His curveball is good, lower 80s, and the changeup and the mid to upper 80s as well. Like I looked at Holobetz and the progression that he made, it was just really encouraging to me. I think it's somebody that people really haven't caught up on, but another just pitch dev success in this organization. I think he's going to be really, really good next year and maybe catch some more eyes. So Holobetz is definitely somebody that I think people are still sleeping on.
I completely agree with that. And I think that there's some really interesting underlying pitch data with him with regards to like his fastball shape is really interesting. It's, a really flat approach angle from a low release height with pretty good IVB and horizontal, like vertical break and horizontal break. So it's got that, the run, but also ride. So it's a really interesting fastball, and he can locate it. As you said, like he does not walk anyone. Fastball had a 72% strike rate this year. Like he can get ahead consistently, which then unlocks anything because he's got 4 pitches. As you said, he mixes them well. He can throw them all for strikes. So I think that he's a really interesting guy, especially if the velo continues to tick up.
Yeah, absolutely. So somebody I'm watching close, but it's going to do it. Great episode. Ian, thanks for your time. If anything you want to plug, feel free to do so, and we'll get out of here.
No, well, thank you for having me on. It's you're a great help to us during the season, and it's always fun to talk shop. But yeah, just if you're interested in hearing Chris and I talk more, you should maybe check out the Sox Prospects podcast coming up because Chris will be a guest to talk about some Arizona Fall League stuff coming up. So give that a listen if you're into that Red Sox prospect stuff.
Absolutely. And Sox Prospects does independent coverage of the Red Sox farm system. So be sure to support. They do kind of a yearly fundraiser, but it's a big help for all the travel expenses that the guys do for scouting trips, for spring training. And Ian's kind of traveling throughout the Northeast to different parks and seeing them up there. So be sure to support the site when you can. But it's going to do it. We'll see you again soon. We'll talk another farm system. Not sure which will be next, but we'll let you know, and looking forward to next time. But again, it's been the Minor League Baseball Show, Boston Red Sox Top Prospects Edition.